Outcome Memories was one of the greatest EXE fan games to ever exist. It brought the community up in a time when they needed it after the disaster was cancelled, and did so much more for everyone who was part of it. But unfortunately, this tale did not end in a good way. And as you all know, about a week ago, the game was permanently cancelled. In today's video, we're going to be going through the entire history of Outcome Memories, from the beginning to the end, talking about the rise, the fall, and the death of Outcome Memories. Before we begin, I want to say make sure to like and subscribe so you get more content like this, but let's dive into one last story of what happened to Outcome Memories. Outcome Memories originally began in November 22nd, 2023. This is when the Discord was first created, and the idea of it was actually brought to light. At this time, the disaster was around 3 years old, and people, known as Sobi and some others, wanted to create a game kind of similar to that, but inside their own style. This means that it would have the same survival aspects, but they'll completely and utterly revamp it. We can see that today by, although having the same formula as Outcome Memories, being very different inside of the gameplay, map design, and overall flow of the game. Now this might come as a surprise, but when it was created in 2023, turns out it would have taken another additional year of development before version 0.1. At this time, the Discord racked up almost 150,000 members before the game was originally released. This built up a lot of hype and a lot of new traits and characteristics for the game, as they slowly revealed stuff over time. Before the game was initially relaunched, we knew that there was many characters coming to the game, such as 2011X, 2017X, or even Genesis X. With all of these, it built up major hype for when the game would finally release. They also showed that this game would have almost 20 EXEs and around 25 survivors inside the game, proving that it would be one of the biggest projects to ever be created. And with that, all the fans had to do was wait until one day it finally was available. Then, out of the blue, no one knew, on July 25th, 2025, Outcome Memories version 0.1 was released. This game was released a few months after the Sonic.EXE The Disaster's cancellation. So with that game out of the way, and probably the most popular EXE game of all time, this game was center stage for all the fans to see, since it was the only one actually coming out. And with that, the game was instantly a major success. This game normally channeled in around 20,000 active players almost all the time, peaking at around 40,000 and going to low only around 15,000. And it had an average of a 90% like rate, which is pretty high for a Roblox game. In the original release of the game, there was 1 EXE and 7 survivors. The EXE being 2011X, and the survivors being Cream, Metal Sonic, Tails, Sonic, Eggman, Amy, and Knuckles. With these 7 characters, they were able to make the game pretty diverse for a first opening, as long as for a fact that they had 4 maps that were able to be played, and cosmetics, which many games of predecessors of it before did not have. Of course, there was the demo of the game called Income Memories, but even with that, that was only a mere glimpse of what this game actually was. Each character had their own special passives, many abilities, and different combos you could use to actually survive the EXE. And of course, on the launch of the game, there was many bugs that were fixed really fast. This was a breath of fresh air for the community, since in fact we didn't actually have a Sonic.EXE game for around half a year. And with hopes looking low, this was probably one of the best things that could have came out. And as it continued on, many different changes happened to the rosters and how close that version 0.2 would come out. Now originally, inside of the main roster, Sonic.OMT was supposed to be a part of it. This problem happened only around a month after the game was released. But because of controversies with the creator, another fan favorite character known as Tripwire or Tails Doll would be filling that role. And just as of around a month after the game released, we were able to see what actually was coming out in Outcome Memories version 0.2. These characters would be Colossus, Tripwire, Blaze, and Silver. At the time, we did not know that Fleetway was going to be a character, because originally he was actually cancelled. But as things continued, we started adding more skins and almost a custom line skins for all the survivors. These were known as the outcome skins, basically saying that if you got the skin, you know how to play the character very well, because you played many matches with them. And because of all of this and kept build up hype for Outcome Memories version 0.2, it was really believed that it would come out soon and it would be amazing. But that did take a few months, since unfortunately there was many delays. But finally, in December 13th, the game was finally released in version 0.2. This was by far the highest peak of the game would ever get. It was at around 200,000 1,000 active players when the update came out, and it brought fan favorite characters such as Colossus and Tails doll. And with it, it brought many new characters from the game, from this game no longer averaging around 20,000 players to averaging around 30 to 40,000 players. The game seemed to be at the peak of everything, since it was practically now the disaster, but almost 100 times better for many people who decided to play it. And of course, all the music inside the game was absolutely amazing. There was many different LMSs, and the game overall was really fun. But unfortunately, that's where all the good in this ends, because we were on talking about the rise of Outcome Memories, how it succeeded, how it was better than any other project that was made for Roblox or in the EXE community as a whole. But unfortunately, with all great things, there was a dark side to this. And this dark side was kind of the fall of the game. In the beginning, you have to know some context. With the fall, you have to remember that these people were not making any money from this, since the Sonic.EXE or just a Sonic fan game in general cannot make money off of people. This is mainly believed why Sonic.EXE the disaster was removed, because there was a donation board, but it's still unknown to this day. And almost all of these people were either still inside of college or university, or heck, even still inside of high school. So one of the biggest controversies that really began was the delays and the removal of some songs. Originally, Outcome Memories version 0.2 was supposed to come out around Halloween when the Halloween update happened. Unfortunately, because of major delays and they had to entirely remove a character from the update known as Fleetway, it came out all the way in December, which is a 2-month gap. This is when the game kind of started to crumble, for a fact that it was almost 5 months between updates, and because of how early in development the game was, many people didn't actually like how long it was taking. And of course, we have the Astronova incident. If you don't know, Astronova was one of the composers for the game, making so many soundtracks that you're aware of, such as Breaking Free or the Knuckles one. And unfortunately with Astronova, because of the community, he no longer wanted to be part of his project. And with that, took away the 2 most popular songs for the game. This means that there was no more Feel the Fury, there was no more Breaking Free, and there was no more other ones. Of course, we still have ones such as Eggman or Metal Song, since they were created from other people, but this took a giant divot and sparked a lot of controversy inside of the EXE community. This was signs of the game was finally starting to break and crack. But with it, they kept pushing through, and although many people had quit around the time, there were still so many people passionate about this project, and so many people wanting to continue to create this amazing game. Then once we watched around Halloween, they did actually put inside of the game, known as events, where you're able to see when updates coming out, that the game was supposed to update. But when it didn't, like I said, many people got very angry about this. And that was one of the major issues with the game's falling, was the community. Let's just say the community was like a pack of rabid dogs, because if you take them off, they would be very aggressive about it. Like I said, this is one of the mainer reasons why Astronova left, and many of the issues happened on later. But then we kept going on. There's very few bugs inside of the beginning, and they did fix a lot of issues such as EXE not be able to use her rage mode during Last Man Standing, and a lot of general improvements. But then when Outcome Memories version 0.2 released, it kind of was mixed reviews. Although it had so many players and was so amazing, the issue with Roblox was it was one of the most buggy updates we ever got. There were so many balancing issues and so many issues in general that almost every single day a new hotfix or patch notes had to be available. If you would buff one character but realize it was too weak, nerf it and realize they're too strong now, and keep going inside of an infinite cycle. A main example of this is Colossus. In the beginning, he did 55 damage, which sounds like a lot since he's able to one-shot people who were down. Because of his damage and his other abilities were so high, you could go from 100 HP down to 10 within 2 seconds. But then once they finally nerfed him, he almost did no damage at all, for a fact that his attack speed and his walk speed were super slow, so it was really difficult to play him. Then we decided to buff him again, which gave him even more damage, around 65, but the issue with that is one character known as Silver, who was supposed to have 105 HP to counteract him, practically became an unessential perk. This is just one of the examples of the issues. But there's also many things such as the maps being too big, they added maps or removed maps. For example, we had Not Perfect, which many people disliked because you could fall out of a map, and there's many people who just dislike the maps in general. Now, although this wouldn't break a community, and it didn't, it was still some major issues that happened to a lot of players. When almost every other game you're getting stuck on an invisible wall, or your game was crashing because of how laggy it was, it made many people very annoyed. I mean, listen, I have a high-end computer, but when I'm normally running 240 frames, and somehow we go down to 10 on Angel Island, there is a bit of an issue. And issues there were. behind the scenes, there was a lot of issues occurring still. One of them was many people disagreed on the development, people taking mental health breaks because of the community. Because you have to remember, the community had around 250,000 people in it around this time. When you have a community that big, you're bound to have many issues if not handled properly. And not to mention, there was a lot of issues behind the scenes with developers disagreeing or there being a lack of communication between the developers and the testers. It was kind of like two sides of the same coin, where many people knew what was happening, but at the same time, there was little communication actually going on. Because of this, updates were kind of delayed, as you know, with version 0.2, or didn't feel like they were fully finished enough and should have been available. Not to mention, balancing was a huge issue, since characters like Silver just didn't really feel like they were at all useful for the team. Some characters were heavily weaker than the other ones, and made very little people play them. And not to mention, that there were some controversies in the background of what these people have done or said, which we won't get into. But overall, with all the highs inside Outcome Memories, there was some major issues that declined the game a bit, but still stayed strong. By all means, this was an amazing game for content creators and people to get together. Although there were some falls, it was still together a really good game. But unfortunately, with a rise and a fall, it eventually leads to death. Unfortunately, the plane of Outcome Memories never made it to its landing, and sadly crashed inside the ocean, where it lays to today. This part is the death of Outcome Memories. Talking about the death, this has only happened inside of the past 2 months, so it is still pretty recent. Around December 31st is when it initially began. The creators of Outcome Memories felt like the community wasn't really liking what they were doing or always pressured them to do more and more. There was a lot of issues with mental capacity and the fact that even though we did so much work and had so many people, it seemed like no one was ever truly satisfied at the game. Many people were mad at little updates, little changes, or the fact that everything was not perfect. And this, unfortunately, because of the amount of disagreement inside of the EXE community, mainly around developers, had a lot of the EXEs pulled. Now when I say EXEs pulled, remember, there was a huge roster of almost 20 EXEs. We had people like No More Innocence, Rewrite who was revealed, we had Fleetway, we had Colossus, we had Genesis.EXE, and Lord.EXE, the Allfather, and just so many more that were actually coming to the game. And although we only had 3 at this time, version 0.3, which was the next update, seemed like it was going to bring so much to the game, especially since we knew that 2 new survivors were coming, known as Shadow and Fang. But because of a divide in the community and issues with characters such as Raven, who was the owner of some of the EXEs, sadly, some EXEs were cut. Now, before any of you remember, you didn't have to worry about Colossus or Tripwire, or even 2011X really, or Sonic.EXE, since those characters were basically owned by Outlake. And since he was honestly very appreciative of this project, he didn't really bother if they were using them or not. But the issues with Raven and other characters is the fact there was many disagreements on how the characters should work or balancing, or the fact there was no more trust between them and the community. Before the game fully fell off, we lost some major EXEs. And unfortunately, some of the most popular EXEs were scrapped. These being the Allfather, EXE, Genesis.EXE, Corin.EXE, and 2017X. These were by far some of the most popular EXEs to ever be inside the fandom, bringing many people to actually join the game and wait for arrival. They were cool characters and honestly had amazing concepts of how they were playing, but because of a lack of trust between the community, developers, and honestly the owner of the characters, they were decided to be pulled from the game. So first was Astronova removing the soundtracks, and then with the characters being removed from the game, this trend just didn't look good. Especially for a fact now, the roster lost 25% of their characters. Although this might not sound like a lot, that was some of the most popular and honestly characters that carried the game a lot. And sadly, on January 11th, 2026, the game was shelved. Because of all harassment and controversy, they decided to shelve the game for a later date. Shelved means is that the game will no longer be worked of as of now, but they will continue in the future. This means, say if there's 10 people on development, right now there will be 0, but it is not cancelled. They'll continue it a little later. So for right now, the game was shelved, and that meant that there's no more updates. Maybe a patch note here or there if the community really needed it, but it was a stopping point. This upset many fans inside the community for a fact that practically the game they were having so much fun with and were seeing the development practically crumbled within a side of a week. Not only did we lose so many characters, but we also lost the game itself practically. But there was still a sparking hope. There's still a person who can make things better. This was one of the developers known as Romeo. Romeo, developer slash community manager, was by far the most popular figure inside of the community. He always made funny and cool videos, and he honestly was acting as a hype member for everyone. So when the game was canceled, he posted almost every single day, explaining what's happening and how they're going to continue and improve in the future. Even though the game was shelved, it seemed like it was going to come back even stronger, even better than ever, with especially the most popular person saying everything will be alright. And guess what? It was. Until January 25th. January 25th was one of the two-part days of the death of Outcome Memories. On this day, Romeo woke up in the morning to find out that he was no longer on the team. The person that everyone had their trust in, the person who was the main person practically of Outcome Memories, was just removed and fired from the Outcome Memories team. With this, it also removed Furnace, which is by far the most popular EXE. Not only this was because there was a new owner of Outcome Memories, well, co-owner. And they felt like although he wasn't doing much with the team, they decided to let him go. But in fact, all he was doing was requesting a mental health break. And with this caused many issues. To begin with, Sobi, the original creator who's been around since the beginning, was actually doxed. If you don't know what dox means, it's someone shows up your house and does something. So when he was sleeping around 3 in the morning, there was many people throwing snowballs at his house. Now this was absolutely mad for the Outcome Memories community, showing how mad people were with this decision and how many people felt like they were just ruining their game. And because of all of the backlash, because of all of the harassment, and because of so many things going wrong within these 2 weeks, January 26th, the game was finally and sadly canceled. The main dev Sobi said there will be no more Outcome Memories. It is permanently and forever canceled. The game will still be up for people to play, and they did add Fleetway as a killer and Furnace inside private servers, but for actual updates or content or just being there in general, the game will no longer exist. This meant on January 26th, around 3 weeks ago, that was the death and end of Outcome Memories. And with that, this 6-month saga of a game growing to be so great, having so much memories and stuff, sadly faded away as many games have. This death was even worse than Sonic.EXE The Disaster, which was just deleted. It was worse than Sonic.EXE The Disaster Reborn, which had had poor programming. This was many people's lives, friendships, and many things destroyed from one simple game and 2 simple decisions. And to this day, Outcome Memories is still cancelled. And they finally added their final song being Super Sonic, who unfortunately couldn't have saved the day. With all of this in mind, we saw the rise, the fall, and the drowning slash death of Outcome Memories. This game will be missed, as it was super popular with all of our fandom. But as of everything inside of a life, we must move on. So even for me, Outcome Memories is my personal favorite game of all time, but I'll be seeing you guys inside of a new asymmetrical horror game. So I want to thank you all for watching this small documentary of what happened to Outcome Memories. The rise, the fall, decline, and death. And since I won't be catching you in game, I'll catch you sometime in the future in next video. Outcome Memories was a great ride. Let's see what happens next. Later.